There is a journey that every empath walks alone, a path that is often invisible to the outside world and rarely acknowledged by those who have never experienced it. It is not written about in most psychology textbooks, and it is rarely discussed in conventional therapy sessions because the empath's experience is so deeply internal that it defies easy description. But if you are an empath watching this, you know exactly what I am talking about because you have lived it. You feel things before they happen, sensing the shifts in energy before anyone else notices. You absorb emotions from rooms the moment you enter them, taking in the mood like a sponge soaking up water. And you have probably spent most of your life being told that you are too sensitive, too emotional, or that you need to toughen up and stop feeling so much. These words have likely been spoken to you by well-meaning friends, frustrated family members, or partners who could not understand why you reacted so deeply to things that barely registered with them. But what if I told you that your sensitivity is not a weakness, that the very qualities that have made you feel different, even broken at times, are actually the foundation of something powerful? What if the very thing that has made you feel different, even broken, is actually a psychological superpower that most people will never understand or possess, a gift that sets you apart from the majority of humanity? The research on highly sensitive persons, pioneered by Dr. Elaine Aron, reveals that approximately 15-20% of the population has a nervous system that is fundamentally different from the rest. You process information more deeply than others, taking in more details and reflecting on them more thoroughly. You notice subtleties that others miss, the small shifts in tone, expression, and energy that reveal the truth beneath the surface. And when it comes to emotional information, you are essentially operating with high-definition perception in a world where most people are still using standard definition, seeing only what is obvious while you perceive the full spectrum. Today, we are exploring the final stage of an empath's patience that nobody prepares you for, the moment when everything changes and the empath is never the same again. And by the end of this video, you will understand yourself in a completely new way, recognizing the patterns that have shaped your life and the potential that lies ahead. The final stage of an empath's patience is the moment that nobody prepares you for, the moment that catches everyone off guard because it looks so different from everything that came before. For years, the empath has been the picture of patience, the embodiment of understanding, the model of forgiveness. They have absorbed countless disappointments, forgiven repeated betrayals, and extended grace to people who never deserved it. They have been told that their patience is a virtue, that their willingness to understand is a gift, that their ability to forgive is a strength, and for a long time, they believed it. They wore their patience like a badge of honor, proof of their goodness and their capacity to love. But what nobody tells you is that patience has a limit, that even the most enduring heart eventually reaches a point where it can no longer extend grace to people who refuse to change. The final stage of an empath's patience is not a dramatic explosion, not a confrontation filled with anger and accusation. It is quiet, almost imperceptible, a shift that happens internally before it becomes visible to anyone else. It is the moment when the empath stops hoping, stops waiting, stops believing that things will eventually get better. It is the moment when they stop explaining themselves, stop trying to make people understand, and simply accept that some people will never understand. This is the moment when patience transforms into something else entirely, something that looks like indifference to those who do not understand, but is actually the deepest form of self-respect. The final stage of an empath's patience is rooted in the psychological concept of emotional exhaustion, a state of depletion that occurs when the demands placed on a person's emotional resources exceed their capacity to replenish them. For years, the empath has been giving without receiving, pouring their energy into relationships that offer little in return. They have been carrying the emotional weight of everyone around them, absorbing stress, anxiety, and pain that was never theirs to carry. They have been the listener, the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who always understands and never asks for anything in return. This constant giving creates a deficit that cannot be sustained indefinitely. The empath's emotional reserves slowly deplete, like a bank account that is constantly being withdrawn from without any deposits. Eventually, there is nothing left to give, and the patience that once seemed endless finally runs out. This is not a choice. It is a biological and psychological necessity. The nervous system simply cannot continue operating at this level of constant demand without eventually breaking down. The final stage of an empath's patience is the nervous system's way of saying, enough. I can no longer do this. It is a protective mechanism, a survival instinct that kicks in when the empath has been pushed too far for too long. What makes this final stage so difficult to understand from the outside is that it often appears to come out of nowhere. People who have benefited from the empath's endless patience are often shocked when it finally disappears. They remember the empath as someone who always forgave, always understood, always gave second chances. They assume that because the empath has tolerated so much in the past, they will continue to tolerate it indefinitely. They do not see the gradual erosion of the empath's patience, the countless small disappointments that accumulated over time. They do not notice the weight of each broken promise, each ignored boundary, each moment of emotional neglect. They only notice when the empath finally stops, and they are left wondering what happened. But the truth is that the empath did not change overnight. The change had been building for months or even years, long before anyone noticed. The final stage of an empath's patience is the result of countless small decisions, each one a tiny step toward the inevitable conclusion. The empath did not wake up one day and decide to stop caring. They simply reached a point where caring had become too costly, where the price of patience had become higher than they could afford to pay. The psychological mechanism behind this transformation is what researchers call the adaptation level phenomenon, the tendency for people to become accustomed to their circumstances and to require increasing levels of stimulation to achieve the same level of satisfaction. In relationships, this means that the empath's patience becomes normalized, expected, and eventually taken for granted. What once seemed generous becomes routine. What once felt special becomes ordinary. The empath's efforts are no longer appreciated because they have become the baseline, the minimum standard. This is why the final stage of an empath's patience often comes as such a shock. The people who took the empath for granted never realized how much they were receiving because they had grown accustomed to receiving it. The empath's withdrawal is not a punishment. It is a correction, a rebalancing of a relationship that had become dangerously one-sided. It is the empath finally recognizing that they have been giving away their peace, their energy, and their self-respect, and deciding that they are no longer willing to do so. This is not selfishness. It is survival. The final stage of an empath's patience is also deeply connected to the concept of boundaries. Boundaries are the limits that define where one person ends and another begins. They are essential for healthy relationships because they protect each person's autonomy and well-being. But for many empaths, boundaries do not come naturally. They have spent so much time focusing on the needs of others that they have lost sight of their own needs. They have been conditioned to believe that setting boundaries is selfish, that saying no is a rejection, that protecting their peace is a betrayal of their caring nature. The final stage of an empath's patience is often the moment when they finally recognize the importance of boundaries, when they understand that they cannot continue giving without receiving, that they cannot keep pouring from an empty cup. This is the moment when the empath learns to say no without guilt, to walk away without explanation, to protect their peace without apology. It is the moment when they stop seeking permission to exist, to have needs, to take up space. And it is the moment when they begin to reclaim the parts of themselves that they had lost in the service of others. The research on behavior change shows that small, specific commitments are far more effective than grand resolutions, that incremental progress is more sustainable than dramatic transformation. Do not try to transform everything at once, because that approach often leads to burnout and disappointment. Pick one insight from this video, one idea that resonated with you, one pattern to watch for, one behavior that you recognize in yourself, one behavior to modify, one small change that can make a difference. And start there, because that is where real change begins. Remember, knowledge without action is just entertainment, a pleasant diversion that does not change anything. But knowledge with consistent action is genuine transformation, a shift that reshapes your life. You now have the knowledge, the understanding of the final stage of patience that nobody prepares you for. The next move is entirely yours, because no one can make this journey for you. Choose wisely, because your choices will determine your future. If this resonated with you, subscribe to Human Behavior Intelligence, because this channel exists to help you understand yourself and others on a deeper level, to provide the insights you need to grow. Every video combines research-backed psychology with practical insights you can actually use, bridging the gap between theory and practice. The next video drops soon. and you will not want to miss it, because it will take you even deeper into the fascinating complexity of human behavior. Until then, stay observant, stay curious, and never stop learning about the fascinating complexity of human behavior, because the more you understand, the more you can grow. And remember, your sensitivity is not a weakness. It is a superpower, a gift that sets you apart. The final stage of an empath's patience is not the end of your kindness, not the loss of your compassion. It is the beginning of kindness that includes yourself, the moment when your compassion finally turns inward. It is the moment when you stop giving your peace away to people who do not value it and start protecting it as the precious resource it is. That is the final stage of patience, and it is the beginning of true freedom.